The day Tim proposed, I suddenly heard my best friend's thoughts. Laugh all you want, fool, he's in love with me. My back is so sore, Tim was wild last night. No, I can't think about it, so embarrassing. Being with Tim for 5 years, it looked like we were finally reaching our happy ending. Today is my 26th birthday, and also the day he proposed. The event was at a fancy venue, decorated so beautifully it could rival a wedding. Tim invited all our close friends and family. In that moment, he held a bouquet of bright red roses. His proposal speech was pretty cliché. But he said, "Anna, there's elegance in being common, and I know you feel my heart. Will you marry me?" Looking at the deep affection in his eyes, I smiled and was about to take the flowers from his hand. Suddenly, I heard my best friend Shirley's voice. Laugh all you want, fool, he's in love with me. My back is so sore, Tim was wild last night. No, I can't think about it, so embarrassing. My hand froze, and I looked up in shock, but Shirley seemed perfectly normal, full of gentle smiles. But as I looked down, the voice echoed again. Oh my God, why did she look at me all of a sudden? I thought I slipped up. It's not time yet. But Anna, one day I'll tell you all this to your face. My ears buzzed with disbelief. Tim didn't notice and asked again, Anna, will you marry me? I glanced at him, then at Shirley, and couldn't help but test her. Shirley, do you think I should say yes? Shirley immediately hugged me, eyes welling up with tears. Anna, are you nervous? Don't worry, everyone sees how Tim's been with you all these years. You can relax, if he ever bullies you, I'll cut him up myself. I watched her face, pretending to shyly nod. Tim, I agree. The next moment, Shirley's voice returned. What's there to be nervous about, fool, it's all a sham. But I could see clearly she hadn't opened her mouth. Was I somehow hearing her inner thoughts? Recalling her words, a chill ran through me. I accepted Tim's proposal, and the room cheered. Tim hugged my waist and leaned in to kiss me, but I turned my face away, instinctively looking at Shirley. She was staring straight at us. I playfully hit Tim's chest, acting coy. Everyone's watching. Come over to my apartment tonight. Tim was stunned for a moment, then lifted me up and spun me around. He asked quietly, Are you sure? Leaning my head against his shoulder, I nodded, sneaking glances at Shirley. In a tone just loud enough for the three of us to hear, I said, Yeah, tonight I'm all yours. Almost immediately, I heard Shirley's voice. What? Anna, didn't you say no to premarital sex? You witch, Tim is mine. But she kept smiling, looking at me with friendly eyes. Disgust welled up inside, and I pushed Tim away. I clenched my trembling hands, struggling to stay calm. I'm going to the bathroom. Tim offered to join me, but I refused. Leaving the room, a chill ran through me despite the warm April weather. In the bathroom, I splashed water on my face until my head cleared. The fact that I could hear thoughts wasn't as shocking or infuriating as the things Shirley was thinking. One's my longtime boyfriend, and the other's my best friend. We've been through college together and entered the adult world, our bond is tight. Yet they were hooking up. Why deceive me together? Why not tell me? Then why propose? I was too shocked and angry to even cry. Looking back, maybe they weren't entirely subtle. Like the hand in Shirley's Twitter pic at dinner, obscured with a mosaic. Or that night I couldn't reach either of them during a college reunion I missed. It wasn't just one night. There were many nights they were both unreachable, and I stupidly thought they each had their own things. Little did I know, they were spending those nights together. I stayed in the bathroom a long time until Shirley came to find me. Anna, are you still in there? Are you okay? After several deep breaths, I opened the door, saying, I'm fine, it just feels a little unreal. Shirley cheerfully linked her arm in mine. Are you so happy you're gonna faint? Anna, you're truly the happiest. She sounded sincere, but I resisted the urge to push her away. How can anyone have such contrasting faces? Not knowing their real intentions, I decided to play along. Shirley, how was your first time? Did it hurt? Shirley smiled flirtatiously, and I noticed a sudden darkness in her eyes. What a naive little fool. Did you really think Tim was holding out just for you? Once again I heard her thoughts. Anna, mind if I ask, all these years have you ever wondered if Tim might have someone else? I looked at her with a pointed gaze, then sighed. Honestly, I never really believed it, but guys, you know, fooling around a bit isn't a big deal. If he really held it in, I'd be the one ending up unhappy. Besides, anyone else is just a side piece. I don't care about chickens like that. Tim's heart is with me, otherwise, he wouldn't propose, right Shirley? Shirley eagerly nodded in agreement. Of course, otherwise I wouldn't let it slide. But internally, she was screaming, you're the chicken, your whole family's chickens. Once Tim drains your family's wealth, all you'll be good for is being a chicken. Hearing that, my face turned cold. Ah, so it's not for love, but for money, then. Shirley continued silently cursing me. I slowly pulled my arm from hers and went to wash my hands, looking into the mirror. As I lowered my head, I gave a cold laugh. Should I call them naive or stupid with such enormous greed? Aren't they afraid it'll be their downfall? That night, Tim didn't get on the elevator to my apartment. The nursing home called, saying his mom hasn't been eating, drinking, or sleeping these past couple of days, and when bedtime rolls around, she refuses to get into bed. They asked him to visit. I thought it was pretty convenient. I put up a hand to keep him from leaning in closer. With a hint of compassion, I told him, go ahead, your mom's important. I knew he'd definitely go. At least in front of me, he's always been good to his mom. Pretending not to notice the lingering look in his eyes filled with a mix of regret and reluctance, I kept smiling. Tim sighed heavily and then turned away. I watched him leave, my face gradually cooling off. Even without the call from the nursing home, there's no way he was coming into my apartment tonight. And whether he was really going to see his mom or hanging out with Shirley, I didn't want to care anymore. I needed some space to sort out this mess. Like, when did the two of them start seeing each other? Honestly, Shirley and I never really clicked from the start. We were college roommates, but she kept to herself and wasn't close to anyone. It wasn't until both of us had boyfriends that we found something in common to talk about. Over the years, she'd occasionally post stuff about relationships on Twitter along with some photos. Whenever I asked about it, she'd just smile and say she'd share the good news in time. Looking back at her expressions then, there was always something off. I feel a dull ache in my heart. She and Tim didn't get along well initially, and they would even compete for my attention. Turned out it was all fake. I almost want to applaud them. They gave me an epic-level betrayal with Oscar-worthy acting. As for Tim, I never thought we'd end up here together. Through the years, his kindness toward me was noticeable to everyone. Especially after my brother and sister-in-law passed away unexpectedly, it increased by the day. I didn't think much of it, assumed he was genuinely caring. He once said, Anna, even though you've lost two people who loved you dearly, I'll treat you twice as well and never let you suffer. Listen to that. Such sweet talk. I smirked sarcastically, picked up my car keys, and headed home. After a few days at home, I decided not to tell my parents the truth just yet. When they talked about Tim, they went from being critical to singing his praises. I listened silently, though my heart ached even more. Even my dad, who's been savvy in business for decades, misjudged this time. Tim, Shirley, you really have outdone yourselves. People's greed is something you can't underestimate. Just because you're good to them, doesn't mean they'll be grateful. Since they crossed the line first, I won't be nice about it either. I started taking an active interest in the family business and reached out to a childhood friend who just got back from studying abroad for a favor. 2 days later, I called everyone for dinner. At the table, I introduced Richard to Shirley. We're all adults, no need for words to understand what that means. I had mentioned setting Shirley up before, but she'd always turned it down. She'd say it wasn't the right time or she wanted someone from a similar background, though the options I offered were way above her family's status. Shirley once said, "Anna, rich mothers-in-law aren't easy to deal with." I don't want to get caught up in all that. I actually agreed with her then. So, was that why Tim appealed to her? Tim just has a mom with Alzheimer's and a high chance of becoming our son-in-law. My mom had me when she was 40, they're getting older now. 3 years ago, when my brother and sister-in-law died in that plane crash, they hadn't had kids yet, so it was just me left. If Shirley could put up with it until Tim gained control of the company, she'd turn into quite the swan. By then, she'd definitely outshine me. I had figured out her plans, but with Richard's help, I was confident this time. Sure enough, when Shirley saw the message I sent her, she was instantly intrigued. This rich kid was taller, better looking, and more charming than Tim, plus he grew up without a mom, bound to be starved for affection. He was clearly well-mannered, and I could see she was kind of taken aback. I smiled as I listened to her thoughts, taking a sip of water. As I had asked, Richard was particularly attentive to Shirley throughout dinner. His dreamy eyes made her blush several times. He even peeled shrimp for her, though his technique was clumsy. It's the thought that counts. "Richard, no need, I can do it myself. Why aren't you calling me by my name? Is it not nice?" "No, it's not that," Shirley shook her head, and a smile spread across Richard's tense face. "Then in the future, can you call me by my name, Shirley?" "Okay, Richard." "Shirley, you have a lovely voice. Do you enjoy singing? Mind if I ask you out for a karaoke night tomorrow?" Shirley hesitated a bit, then shyly nodded. Gotta admit Richard was smooth. If it weren't for knowing his antics, I'd think he fell for Shirley at first sight. He was so obvious about it. Anna introduced him to me, must be a nice guy, right? Comparing him to Tim, well, if I could land him, I wouldn't be losing to Anna at all. I arched an eyebrow, unsure why she felt the need to compete with me. But when thinking about her background, I got it. Shirley had a tough childhood, always been competitive, using education to escape her rural origins. She always said she compared herself to others her age, surpassing them to get where she is today. In her words, that was her way to become successful. During those conversations, her pride and ambition were evident. And here I was, agreeing with her, admiring her independence and drive. Never saw that for her, I was just a stepping stone. I clenched my teeth, reassuring myself. It's okay, better now than never. Tim was about the only one not enjoying this dinner. He seemed unaffected, but with women's intuition, I knew he wasn't pleased. He must have felt smug juggling the both of us, but Shirley's never been the type guided by morals. If she could turn to him, she could certainly turn to someone else. Tim was silent the entire time, and I was lost in my thoughts, too lazy to use Shirley to provoke him. After dropping me off at my apartment, he went back to the office to work late. I handed him 2 big projects, saying it was to build his skills, and so far, he's been reliable. He should be busy for a while, too busy to bother me. Just as Tim left, Shirley called. Knowing her, I could guess why. "Anna, I'm home, are you?" I replied, "Yeah, just got here." "I knew Richard would take care of you." I started building Richard's image in her mind. I asked how she felt. Shirley was reserved. "He's nice, very attentive, but maybe too much so." "Isn't he like that with everyone?" I immediately reassured her, "No way, he doesn't have to worry about other people. The men in their family are all romantics. His uncle never remarried after losing his wife, and Richard's kept a low profile, no scandals. I vetted him for you, but it's up to fate in the end." Shirley chuckled, saying, "Let's just see what happens." But I could hear her real thoughts. Fate? Nah, I don't believe in that. It's up to us. Turns out you can read minds over the phone too. I told Richard to stay close to Shirley. I didn't want her flirting with Tim under my nose. I didn't expect Richard to chase so visibly everyone noticed, Even Calvin came to ask. Richard sent me to ask you. Calvin's a legend in our circle. He just glanced at me and the top dog aura had me telling the truth right away. He'd find out on his own anyway. Calvin frowned, making me nervous. Luckily, he said nothing. Just have a plan. If you need help, let me know. Thanks, Calvin, but I got this. I felt confident about taking down those two. Richard said Shirley was thinking of her options, wanting it all. If he didn't make a move, he wouldn't win her over. I agreed and let him go for it. A month later, Shirley announced their relationship on Twitter. I was the first to like it and shared it with Tim. His reaction? Super calm. Too calm. That's when you know something's up. True enough, a PI snapped him angrily confronting Shirley. She just played weak and made him feel bad, pulling him in for a hug. Tim, I only love you, but I can't refuse Anna's kindness. I worry she already knows something. How could I say no to Richard? Everything I do is for you, and you don't trust me. Tim believed every word she said. I can't believe this is the same Tim I know. Guess he likes this type. I never played weak or pitiful. Rest easy, she doesn't know. Otherwise, her dad wouldn't trust me with big projects like this. I miss you. They moved from being distant to cozy in no time. I stopped the recording and sent it to Richard, teasing, you got played. His reply came a bit later, she's something else, all right. But Shirley fooled Tim. Richard said she started hinting at their future, like getting engaged. She's distancing herself from Tim now. I hired a PI for a month and they found nothing between them. Money wasted. Tim's been down, looks like he really cared for her. And as his fiancé, how could I bear to see him sad? So, I got Dad to promote him to general manager. At 27, managing a publicly listed company? Several financial magazines wanted to interview him. Tim was on cloud 9, super attentive to me. I told him to focus on work, while I'm learning management. We've been busy, haven't seen each other in a while. Tim supports my studying, though he has no clue what I'm actually learning. Looking back, life's been smooth sailing. My brother was alive, family responsibilities didn't fall on me. Now it's different. My newfound interest in the family business made my parents happy. They never pushed me, even let me date Tim when he had nothing. Mom just warned me not to give myself away easily. Now, they think my change of heart is my brother and sister-in-law's doing. After they passed, my parents tried persuading me, leading to me gradually accepting Tim. Thinking of my brother and sister-in-law saddens me. Maybe this ability to read minds, gained since the day of the proposal, is their posthumous help. I'm determined to get Tim out of the company though. Now as GM, he needs a secretary. So, Richard and I went to a top club and picked a pretty, young woman. After some grooming, she was delivered to Tim. The day I was there, I ran into Calvin. Doesn't seem like he visits often, appearing as cold as ever, surrounded by women. Leading Sally downstairs, we caught each other's eye. His face darkened noticeably on seeing us. Richard froze, leaning on me for support, before Calvin pulled him away. He blurted, "Trust me, I'm just here with Anna." The corner of my mouth twitched. Yeah, it's the truth, but did you have to admit it so quickly? Calvin's gaze locked on me, and that invisible pressure hit again. What else could I do? I confessed again. After hearing my plan, Calvin looked a bit puzzled. He stayed quiet for a while before giving a helpless smile. You're going in circles just to entertain yourself, aren't you? He's right, I am going in circles. I could easily start gathering evidence right after the proposal, confront Tim and Shirley face to face, and tell them to get lost. But going that route wouldn't be satisfying enough. I want to lift them up, then let them crash down, so they know how being played, cheated, and betrayed feels. Sure, it'll take some time, but I've got plenty of that, plus patience. I'm not keen on remembering Tim's initial passion and the admiration he couldn't hide. He was probably genuine back then. People change, I get that. I can deal with love turning sour, but their shameless ambition is unforgivable. Yet, deep down, there's a tiny bit of hope for the feelings from when we were young. Reality is, Tim's not worthy. If Shirley could hook him easily, Sally's admiring glances would be too much, too. He's no match for women who've been around the block. The latest scoop from Sally is, Tim's caught up again. He's not only addressing Sally's so-called financial crisis but also helping out her family. If Sally were really just a newbie graduate, she'd be all about Tim. But learning from past mistakes, I approached Sally with total confidence. When my parents came back from their trip, they couldn't understand I got Tim a secretary under their name. I knew it was time to spill the truth. Tim doesn't love me anymore, he's after our family's status. I have to make him quit the company. I didn't mention the mind-reading part, anyone would find it absurd. I thought my folks would struggle with it, but they got it real quick. Anna, we're too old, we misjudged him. Dad's words made my nose tingle. Dad, it's not your age, it's your trust in me. You trusted me and put blinders on about Tim. They didn't oppose in the beginning, just went along in the end. After a heartfelt talk with them and gaining their support, I felt at ease. Richard found out and teased me. What were you thinking? Tim's an outsider, no matter what. He spoke the truth, but I would never admit defeat. Tim's someone my dad personally groomed. I thought he... For who? Himself? Your dad did it for you. Since you've made your choice and he's already not a Tim fan, he's likely relieved. I rolled my eyes. All right, you're the expert. Richard graciously accepted it. Thank you. Then he got serious. It's about time to wrap this up. Shirley's not dropping hints anymore. She's straight up saying she wants my baby. I almost spit out my tea. What innocence do you have? If you said your brother was innocent, I'd believe you. Richard grinned but didn't argue. Really, that woman's got tricks for days. She scares me. If she tricks me once, I'll be booted from the family tree. I couldn't help but laugh. He had a point. Time to get serious. Getting Richard to ditch Shirley isn't hard. I've got loads of photos, videos, and recordings of her with Tim. The latest was when she'd already agreed to go out with Richard. In the showdown, the man's face isn't visible in the pics. When Richard acted heartbroken, looking like a betrayed turtle, questioning Shirley, I was impressed. The acting deserves praise. Shirley denied it, but we had that recording from her bedroom. I had a professional agency verify it. It's definitely your voice. I love you so much, Shirley. I'd take on my whole family for you. Why did you do it? Who's that man? Shirley sobbed, biting her pale lips until they bled, but she wouldn't say. Richard was so devastated he could barely stand, finally suggesting a breakup, and then he left. Shirley collapsed, sobbing in my arms. When she came to, she kept crying. Anna, he doesn't believe me. Who set me up? Who's the jerk? I tuned out the curses. Shirley, it's not that he doesn't trust you. The emails went to both his dad and brother. Richard must have tried hard. But it was pointless. The photos and recording are real. You did cheat on him. You deserve the breakup. Shirley obviously caught on, froze for a moment, then burst into tears again. Who would do this? I can't find a better man than Richard. Right? I grew up with him and never thought he'd care so much this time. He was just crying and everything. Shirley, you're still not talking? Shirley hesitated. If I said I was forced, would he believe me? I silently rolled my eyes. But I acted concerned. Really? Who's the scumbag that forced you? Shirley, you've got to tell me. They might have more on you, so spill the truth. If it's real, Richard will understand. Shirley went quiet, and I shared her silence. I could only hear her thoughts. Anna was right. Richard definitely found out everything, which is why he gave up on me. If I lie, it'll only make him mad. Was it really Tim? I lifted my eyelids a bit. It wasn't hard to see why she thought of Tim. In her limited understanding, she's completely unaware of how wealthy families operate. But soon, Shirley dismissed this theory. Tim would never dig his own grave. The breakup hit her hard, and as her best friend, I had to console her. Remember how dramatic his pursuit was? It must have made someone envious. He must be feeling terrible, but his family cares about their reputation. Oh, Shirley, seeing you so upset, I despise myself for introducing you to Richard. Hearing that, Shirley's eyes brightened a little. Don't say that. I'm really grateful, honestly. Even though the ending wasn't pretty, I was really happy during our relationship. Of course. You almost got to see what it feels like to marry into a wealthy family. I didn't bother asking more about the man in the picture, too many questions, and she'd get suspicious. A few days passed, Shirley started pulling herself together. She asked about how things were between me and Tim. Honestly, I'd been waiting for her to ask that. I've handed over almost all the work to him, but he's so busy now, there's no time left for me. We're planning to get engaged by the end of the year, maybe have the wedding next year. I blushed, feeling shy as I spoke, and Shirley was stunned. After a while, she awkwardly said, "That soon?" Well, congratulations to you both. Tim's already the general manager. Have you guys, I didn't expect her to ask that. Not yet. He's really respectful of me. Shirley suddenly smiled brightly. Yeah, he's always cherished you. Anna, you're still so innocent. No way, Tim has to have someone else. Anna, you're utterly naive. How could she guess that quickly? So Tim was drawn in by something more primal? I scoffed internally, losing even more respect for Tim. To reunite these estranged lovers, I threw a small anniversary party. Shirley agreed to come. And on the day, Tim showed up with Sally. I acted clueless, totally helping Tim flaunt his love. With his little darling around, he couldn't do anything intimate. Sally was flaunting her wealth, a $10,000 bag, a $50,000 watch, and that striking ruby necklace around her neck. Shirley's eyes shot daggers at her. In under 3 months, the one Tim promised was replaced. Shirley got nothing tangible from Richard, just a fleeting taste of affection. How could she be content? Of course, secretly, she thought I was foolish too. I sipped my drink slowly, curious about her next move. As I anticipated, Shirley went back to Tim again. Sally found out from screenshots of Tim's phone messages. Shirley confessed to Tim that she and Richard were clean, explaining their breakup. But Tim, with Sally now, didn't care about anything related to Shirley, nor believed her. After all, he now understood Shirley's character clearly. His biggest concern was discovering someone had snapped proof of him with Shirley. Tim tried to find out more, but came up empty-handed. Shirley was clinging tightly to him now, even sending Sally threatening messages. All three were caught up in a tangled, dramatic relationship. Shirley wished Tim would return to her, yet it was only her dreaming. Rumors began to spread in the office about Tim and Sally's relationship. I started those whispers. When Sally was flirting with Tim in the meeting room, the big screen in the shareholders' meeting showed him shouting on a call. Tim got called for a meeting. He had two choices: get fired without any compensation or resign. Weighing his options, Tim chose to leave on his own accord. That kind of man, I didn't want to see him again. Sending back the engagement ring, I cut him off for good. As a betrayed fiancé, wasn't it only fair to vent to my best friend? I smeared pepper water on my eyes and went to cry it out to Shirley. You and Tim, just like that, it's over? Tim is nothing now. I have nothing left either. Shirley was shocked. Through tears, I saw her colorful expressions, secretly reveling in my satisfaction. All that build-up before was just for this moment and what follows. He betrayed me, Shirley, he betrayed me. Shirley suddenly asked, who could have done this? Why does it seem similar to my situation? Who's targeting me? And who's targeting Tim? Have to admit, Shirley was sharper than Tim. But without any proof, all she could do was wildly guess. Tim wasn't discreet about being with Sally at the office, acting like it was his own company. After he left, Sally disappeared, never heard from again. And all the money he spent on Sally was lost forever. I knew roughly how much he had saved over the years. Tim's mom's care wasn't cheap. With all he'd given Sally, he probably had nothing left. Despite being a general manager, the salary wasn't much, most of his pay came from bonuses. Back to being broke, Tim couldn't find me, so he turned to Shirley to borrow money. She told me herself. "Anna, lucky you didn't get engaged to him. You wouldn't believe how down and out he looks now. He must be devastated, not like himself at all." I feigned surprise. "Huh? That's odd. He should have saved quite a bit by now." Talk about that, and Shirley was livid. Ugh, wasn't it the secretary digging a trap for him, swindling it all away? So pissed off, it makes me mad. I was careful to not wreck my image by spending his money, but Sally's something else. Tim's trash too, even daring to threaten me. After listening to her cursing in her mind, I asked her, "So, did you lend him the money?" "A little bit," she said. "Considering how good he was to you in the past, I helped him this once." I sneered internally. It was probably more about their past together than anything else. What does it have to do with me anyway? Besides, Tim has nothing left to threaten you with, and I could tell even with my eyes closed. After faking some sympathy, I earnestly advised her, "Sorry, Shirley, it's my fault you got involved. Next time he asks for money again, just call the cops." Shirley absent-mindedly nodded. "Don't just say sorry, you can repay the money I spent for you." "Anna, weren't you always so generous before?" I loaned all of my personal savings. Listening to her inner voice, I felt amused. Of all the rich people Shirley knows now, it seems I'm the only one. So she's been inviting me out a lot lately. I couldn't let her down, of course. For Richard's birthday party over the weekend, I offered to bring her along. "Anna, thank you. I've made up my mind, if we can't be lovers, we can at least be friends." Shirley acted like she made a big decision when she agreed to come. But deep down, she didn't think of it that way. Catch one, catch all. If it's not Richard, there's always someone else. I no longer feel like commenting on her outlook on life. The truth is she has decent conditions, but her ambitions are sky high. After experiencing men like Tim and Richard, she won't easily settle for an ordinary white-collar guy. Since she refuses to wake up willingly, let reality hit her hard. Richard's birthday party was extravagant, to say the least. A single bottle of wine on the table could match the price of the priciest bag in Shirley's closet. Jealous of all the other women surrounding Richard, she finally couldn't suppress it any longer and said, "Richard, can we talk?" Richard lazily lifted his gaze and smirked teasingly. He said, "What do I have to talk about with someone who hooked up with her friend's boyfriend?" Shirley's face turned pale as she subconsciously glanced at me. "Richard, what nonsense are you talking about?" Richard looked at her coldly, with a disdainful, unfamiliar gaze that deeply wounded Shirley. But when intimate photos of her and Tim were thrown on the table, she could barely stand. She wobbled. Richard was the focus of the day, with everyone's attention on his every move. Shirley's arrogance and ignorance led her to a point where everyone pointed fingers at her. I looked through each photo calmly, no tears or shouting. Just quietly watched her. Until suddenly, Shirley broke down emotionally. She accused me, "Anna, why are you looking at me like that? I don't need your pity. You knew, didn't you? That's why you brought me here. Sure, you're the saint, and the rest of us are dirty mortals. What guy can stand his girlfriend not letting him touch her for 5 years? You may be beautiful, but aren't you the same with the lights on?" Richard didn't expect her outburst and ordered someone to drag her out. But I told him to hold on a moment. "You're right. But I also never said I couldn't live without Tim. You could have been together openly from the start. Shirley avoided my eyes, muttering, we didn't want to hurt you. I smirked, not needing to retaliate. Richard was already furious. Like a stray dog, Shirley was thrown out. Security told me she laughed and cried by the wall for a while before finally leaving in a frenzy. The butler at my apartment reported that Tim often waited for me at the entrance. So, I instructed my assistant to sell the apartment, moving back home for good. Frankly, if I didn't want to see Tim and Shirley, they'd probably never get the chance to face me. Richard asked if it was all settled. I thought for a bit, then agreed. But he wasn't entirely satisfied, letting Shirley mistakenly believe he paid a fortune for those photos. And Shirley only had Tim's name in mind. Apparently, when Shirley went to Tim for money, he avoided her. She waited for him at the sanatorium, Tim mistaking her as a threat to his mom. In their scuffle, they accidentally injured an elderly passerby. Panicked, they didn't help and instead fled the scene. Thankfully, the elderly man wasn't seriously hurt, but their behavior was too disgraceful, prompting the family to press charges. Supposedly, both of them are now tangled up in court cases. Richard mentioned it to me, my eyelids twitching with concern for the innocent elderly man's safety. After checking, I was relieved to learn the man was indeed all right. Not long after, I officially took over the company. Over the weekend when the appointment letter was finalized, my dad threw a party in my honor, inviting all the local elites. Honestly, I'm not overly fond of such gatherings, but tonight the ladies looked at me with unexpectedly kind smiles. I was clueless until Richard enlightened me. You didn't know? You're now seen as a hot commodity by all those families. Shirley's last words, to some extent, meant Anna's a good girl. Anna, could you be a bit reserved in that area? Clenching my jaw, I felt my face flush. No one enjoys having their private life turned into gossip. I kicked him gently. Why didn't you tell the people there to keep their mouths shut? Oh, I forgot, but I was shocked too. Annoyed, I dragged Richard along. Where to? He asked. To a club. I replied. Thanks to him, I now couldn't shake off the aunties and aunts' looks. For heaven's sake, we're in the 21st century, they shouldn't box women in such traditional norms. Gosh, now I know why they praised me for being well behaved. Richard almost doubled over with laughter beside me. But, unexpectedly, we bumped into Calvin on the way. His first glance fell on mine and Richard's interlocked hands, his brow furrowed. Then he asked, with the party starting, where are you two headed? Having learned from previous encounters, I spun around to cover Richard's mouth, but clearly, it was too late. Calvin, she's making me take her to the club. After Richard blurted out those two words about a male model, the air turned dense. I grabbed my dress hem, my heart pounding in the depths of Calvin's eyes. What if he asked further? What would my answer be this time? Stomping my foot, I fled. Post-party, my suitor count multiplied, bouquets decorating the floors of the executive floor's hallway. Struggling to manage, I finally asked the cleaning aunt to remove all the flowers. She was overjoyed, almost like receiving a bonus. I had Richard spread the word that I'm allergic to pollen, and sure enough, the next day the office looked back to normal, all clean and simple. It's easy to deal with outsiders, but when it comes to family. After I once again turned down my parents' proposal for an arranged marriage, I calmly and rationally called Richard. He picked up pretty quickly, but before he could say anything, I blurted out, "Hey Richard, want to marry me?" I must have scared him because the usually loud Richard was dead silent. With him quiet, I started to feel unsure. I didn't mean like that. I mean, we're at that age, and it's time to settle down. No, I mean. Marry me, you can still do your thing. I won't bother you. It's just that my parents keep pushing me, you know? I kept talking to myself, but the words fake marriage just couldn't come out. Marriage to me is sacred, and I have a deep respect for it. But that respect put me in a tough spot. As I was scrambling to find the right words, finally, there was a response on the other end. Is this Anna? Richard really doesn't suit you. His brother, maybe. Plus, in terms of birth order, it's not Richard's place. Uncle? I was so shocked my phone slipped onto my lap. I had to double check, and yep, it said Richard. Yeah, it's me. Surprised? But I meant it. What do you think, Calvin? Calvin's there too. My grip loosened, and my phone fell on the bed. Then, barely, I heard a cool voice through the receiver. Calvin said, Is that a or not ? What the heck does mean? My mind was a mess. Just when I wanted to ask Richard where he was, his voice came through. He was late to realize, and his voice shot up an octave. Anna, did you just propose to me? Shut up. Calvin and I said at the same time, an awkward connection that left me feeling uneasy. In a hurry, I ended the call. The big room felt empty and silent, but it was like a million thoughts raced past my ears. What was I thinking? I can't even call Richard again. Instead, I confronted him online. But it wasn't until I was about to crash that he called me back. He explained that their uncle had them in the office for a chat tonight. When my call came in, he wanted to hang up but accidentally put it on speaker. So, all three of them heard my embarrassing plea. Can you just be a little more dependable? I vented in frustration, and Richard dramatically declared his innocence. You threw me for a loop with that. I was like having an out-of-body experience. I was already dizzy from my own parents. I know, but you really say whatever comes to mind. After a few muttered words, Richard turned serious. Anna, I've always felt like I'm not very responsible. I'm scared of taking on serious commitments. Marriage is no big deal. If you ask, I'd do anything. But my brother has a point. You're not just some carefree princess anymore. You need more than a playmate. You're the CEO of Song Corp now. And I feel like I can't protect you. Was it just me, or did I detect a hint of sadness? My eyes stung, but I tried to keep my voice steady. I get it. You just keep being the spoiled brat, enjoy your bliss. As long as you don't break the law, I've got your back, still. Richard laughed heartily and then sighed softly. Besides, I can never get past your parents. I couldn't hold back a laugh. All right, enough. Let's pretend this conversation didn't happen tonight. He sure has a lot to think about. Luckily, work kept me busy, and I soon forgot the whole awkward incident. I found out from Twitter that Richard was vacationing on some Southeast Asian island. His post showed a grid of photos filled with people, some I recognized, all looking cheerful and carefree. I liked the post and put my phone away. He doesn't even ask me to tag along before going on trips anymore. Guess being at the top is a lonely business. Having just taken over the company, there's a lot I need to learn, and my schedule is packed. Never-ending meetings, piles of documents to review, and obligatory social events. I may not like it, but in no time, I've learned to charm them at the table. The new secretary, though, young and fresh, couldn't quite hold her liquor despite her best effort. I downed a glass of strong liquor to close the deal, and finally wrapped up the dinner. Are you okay? I'm sorry, she apologized with guilt. I'm not a total lightweight, but it has been a while. Ignoring the queasiness in my stomach, I flashed her a reassuring smile. No worries, don't overthink it. If I hadn't downed that drink, those clients wouldn't have budged. I told her to go on ahead with the driver as I waited in the hotel lobby for my family's chauffeur. Shortly after I shut my eyes, I felt a hand touch my forehead. Startled, I opened my eyes. It was Calvin's composed face. Calvin. Do you have a fever? Why is there no one with you? I touched my warm cheek and quickly shook my head. No, I'm not sick, just had a drink. His brows knitted just a bit. How much? Just one shot, I replied. He called his assistant, and after a short wait, a cup of honey water was in front of me. I'm not fond of honey, but I couldn't refuse his good intentions. Yet before the cup reached my lips, Calvin gently caught my wrist. You don't like it? I paused, and he asked softly, "How about glucose water?" I quickly nodded, and Calvin smiled. I hardly ever saw him smile, but when he did, it was splendid, making his eyes soften. He said, "Anna, you don't have to settle." It brought tears to my eyes immediately. Calvin, usually so reserved, looked slightly flustered. "What's wrong?" he asked softly. His cautious tone made me feel cherished. And just like that, something snapped. Even though it was embarrassing, I couldn't help it. "I miss my brother," I sobbed out. Calvin was taken aback for a moment, complex emotions flashing in his eyes. But his hand gently landed on my head. It was a protective gesture. After a moment, I finally heard his deep sigh. "Anna, when you see me, do you think of your brother? Are you hinting at something?" I gasped, tears welling up in my eyes, just hanging there. He raised his hand, gently wiping away the tear with his slightly rough thumb. I was so stunned, my breathing softened. But with my head still clouded from crying, I barely understood. After finishing a glass of glucose water, the driver still hadn't arrived, and Calvin offered to take me home. Seeing his assistant looking like they wanted to say something, I curiously asked, "Calvin, do you have something else going on?" He looked down with a soft smile and said no. In the car, my emotions had settled back to normal, which made me feel more embarrassed. "Is the work pressure getting to you?" Calvin got straight to the point. I nodded in agreement, a bit. I wish my brother were still here. I admit, I'm not that brave sometimes. But my parents say I'm not any less than my brother. They believe in me, so I've got to do well. "So, it's not just because I'm similar in age to your brother that you think of him." His mood seemed to lift. I slowly rolled down the car window, letting the night breeze cool my face. We started texting each other more frequently. I asked him a lot about work and learned so much. Sometimes I'd jokingly call him teacher, and he'd reply with a flat, "Don't want to be a teacher." I'd stare at the text, lost in thought. But work kept us busy, and we didn't see each other again for over a month. In the evening, I attended a father's friend's birthday banquet. At these events, you'd run into a lot of familiar faces. I couldn't help but scan the crowd for Calvin. I hadn't asked him during the day, so I wasn't sure if he'd show up. But right as the event was about to start, he showed up. And he saw me too. Standing there, feeling a bit nervous as he walked toward me, my heart started racing for no apparent reason. Then suddenly, someone stepped in between us, breaking my gaze. "Anna, can I have this dance?" I lost track of how many dance invites I'd gotten, and I almost rejected again when a hand appeared on the guy's shoulder. Calvin smiled brightly, his voice cool. "She already promised me." The guy looked puzzled, glancing at me. Under a heat-inducing gaze, I could only nod in agreement. I thought Calvin was just helping me out, but he actually wanted to dance. And he wasn't very good at it. He kept stepping wrong and seemed afraid of tripping me, so he held me tightly. My mind went blank in his embrace. When he looked down at me, there was an intense depth in his eyes that made my ears burn. The space between us was so close, a gentle nudge could spark a kiss. In the end, I couldn't take it anymore. How was he both bad at dancing and brave enough to try? "You really need to practice more." A low laugh sounded above my head. Calvin, in his pleasant voice, asked, "Anna, how about changing one thing?" Change what?" "I don't want to be your teacher. I want to be your boyfriend." As the song ended, it felt like fireworks were going off in my ears. I thought of the row of little things he sent me on my office desk. During breaks, I couldn't help but pick them up, look at them, then neatly arrange them again. I also remembered the proposal drafts he'd written for me stored in my phone. Without realizing it, I had become very reliant on him. I nodded, and a visible lightness washed over Calvin. Then, he took my hand and led me outside. "Where to?" His voice was light and breezy. "To a date." Calvin's epilogue. Sam's my good friend, but he's also my rival. We're always competing with each other. If I grow an inch taller this month, he catches up next month. If I come first this time, then it's his turn the next. Finally, my mom was going to have a second child, and I thought there was no way Sam could beat me in this. But a few years later, he got a sister too. And honestly, sisters are cuter than brothers. I wanted a sister myself back then. His sister isn't just cute, she's smart and gets great grades. There was even a time I felt bad for my brother and used my savings to get him private tutoring. But he just wasn't getting it. He even became Sam's sister's little sidekick. I realized then I couldn't compete with Sam anymore. From the day he got a sister, I gave up. Growing up, of course, we didn't keep on competing in silly ways. But these two voices kept ringing in my ears. One would say, "Hey, come with me to pick a gift, it's my sister's birthday." The other would ask, "What should I give Anna for her birthday this year? I've given her everything, and I'm running out of ideas." Different voices, but they're talking about the same person. Why ask me? Do I seem like an expert? I found out my brother liked Anna, which surprised me, but I didn't think it was bad. I even used Anna's brilliance to motivate him, but he really just didn't care. He said, "But school and stuff, I'm just not good at it. Plus, I like Anna now, but who knows in the future." Fair enough. Hopefully, he won't regret not being able to measure up in the future. Sam and I have had similar life paths, but our siblings turned out totally different. When Anna reached level 10 in piano, my brother got rejected by the math coach. When Anna was ruling middle school with top grades, my brother was sent to a private international school. And by the time Anna got into Harvard, my brother was going overseas just to get by. I don't know how two people with such a gap in abilities managed to stay close all those years. Afterward, Sam unexpectedly passed away, Richard went abroad for college, and I hardly ever heard Anna's name anymore. But she left a lasting impression on me. I dated a girl who also had a sister, and whenever she talked about her sister, I couldn't help thinking about Anna. I swear, it's like I was cursed. Since taking over the family business, Richard and I didn't talk much. I heard from Dad about Richard's carefree life overseas, and now that he's back, he's obsessively chasing some girl. I guess those childhood crushes have long passed. My dad was furious about Richard's high-profile behavior. He didn't like any family matters becoming gossip material. I agreed, so I talked to Richard and found out he was chasing Anna's best friend. Actually, Richard had told me most of it. I never thought the well-protected girl would experience such betrayal from a boyfriend and a best friend. She must have been heartbroken. Somehow, I ended up visiting the Song family. After Sam's death, I occasionally visited his parents. Most times, it was just them and the maids at home. Those years, any tidbits about Anna I heard from them. But that day, she was home. She seemed surprised to see me, so I used a flimsy excuse. She answered honestly, very obediently. I thought she'd be upset, but she seemed fine, which was a relief. Her quirky plans made me wonder if our age gap really meant a generation gap. In her shoes, I'd be more straightforward. My visits increased, but Richard was no longer the kid who kept talking about Anna. Until one night, I heard her on the phone with Richard, talking about wanting to get married. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest. Richard couldn't handle this kind of responsibility. But if not Richard, then who? Was my dad serious, or was that a joke? After leaving the study room, I caught Richard and asked if he still liked Anna. He said, sure, he'd always liked her best. But liking her best doesn't mean only liking her. I had a serious talk till my mouth went dry. Then, Richard suddenly squinted and asked me, Calvin, do you like Anna too? I hesitated for a moment. He added, if it's you, I give up, but I'm not gonna help you win her over. Where did this kid get such confidence from? The neighbor's son is more reliable than him. Do I like Anna? I probably do, and have liked her for a long time. I used to just wish for her happiness, but as she blossomed into a beautiful woman, I didn't want anyone else to have her. But if I made a move, she might get scared. So I stayed in the shadows, quietly watching over her. I heard many people send her flowers. I thought about doing the same, but then Richard relayed her message that it's not a good idea. One night, I was supposed to head to the airport but found her sitting alone in a corner. Her face was flushed, her lips were rosy, and for a second, I thought she had a fever. She didn't, thankfully. I noticed she didn't like drinking honey water when she held it and sniffed with her pretty nose. That's a detail I'll remember. I didn't expect her to cry. Though she looked beautiful even when crying, it tore at my heart. I wanted to hug her, but all I did was gently wipe away her tears. This was already stepping the line, yet she looked surprised without moving away. I felt hopeful. I kept finding excuses to see her during work. Luckily, she didn't suspect a thing and even asked for advice, just like she probably did in school, being the good student she was. With a 7-year age gap, I didn't have the courage to ask her out one-on-one, but at least we texted daily. Sometimes, I missed her too much and would video call her. It always took a while for her to answer, but I'd always notice her reddening earlobes. Maybe because she was shy? If so, maybe she wasn't against me. Desire is a deep pit. I went from hoping she'd be happy to wanting to be the one to make her happy. From saying a few words to meeting more, then wanting more and more. Not sure if Anna realized my feelings, but recently she's ignored my hints, and I'm about to lose it. I didn't ask if she'd attend the birthday banquet, afraid she wouldn't if she knew I'd be there. Luckily she was there, and I couldn't help moving towards her. I can't dance, but knew she could. She might have just been giving me an out when she took my hand, but I was thrilled. Even if I wasn't great, I fumbled through, not caring if people laughed, as long as the dance didn't end. I somehow built up the courage and asked if I could be her boyfriend just as the song ended, pulling her away to confirm when she didn't respond. That night, I kissed her forehead softly. Weeks later, we kissed. A month later, I visited Anna's parents as her boyfriend. 6 months later, we got engaged. A couple of months later, in a romantic fall, we got married. I'd say life's been worth it.